In this video, we're going to look at 8 different strategies that you could potentially use on COMC to try to make some profit on there. Let's get into this. I'm going to list the pros and cons for each of these, and there's certain contexts in which each of these might be useful. So don't think of this as like 8 blanket strategies. It's kind of depending on a few things. So let's go ahead and get into this with strategy 1. Strategy 1 is about slowly selling your cards that are worth maybe about $3 to $25 or so. Now, this is, I would suggest, the main reason to use COMC. The reason for this is it's very easy. The pros, this is extremely easy. You send in the card, you don't have to do anything after you price it. All of the shipping work is done by COMC. All of the customer service work is COMC. It's kind of hands off. And there's a large audience also. This is another pro of this. There's a large audience on COMC. So, your cards tend to sell there pretty well. I think next to eBay, I would assume it's the second largest sports card marketplace there is. So, you have a lot of people, a lot of eyeballs looking at your cards in general. Now, on the con of this, there is a 50-cent per card ingestion fee when you send cards into the platform. So if you send 1,000 cards in to sell, you have to spend $500 before you've even started to make any money at all. So it kind of starts you in the negative. So that's one negative. Another is it's quite slow to, when you send in a box of 200 cards, it might be 4 months before those cards are all up on the platform. And then once they're on the platform, cards tend to sell slower on COMC than on eBay. You do have a large audience here on COMC compared to a lot of other places, but eBay does have more. But that's why I would suggest this specifically for these cards that are kind of $3 to $25 or so, because if it's more than $25, I think it's worth the time to just post it on eBay. It will probably sell better, or probably sell quicker at least. And if it's under $3 because of this 50-cent ingestion fee, I probably wouldn't want to sell it on COMC. Maybe I'd rather get it into like a lot of something and sell it with a lot, or maybe a live auction or something like that, depending on what it is. But I wouldn't necessarily want to do it on COMC if it's under that, because then if that card also goes down just a little bit, maybe it's a $2 card now, but it doesn't sell for a while, and then a bunch more cards are added onto the platform. The next person sells it for $1.99, the next person $1.95, the next person $1.75, and soon it's down to like a 75-cent card, and soon like you're not even making any money over the price you paid to ingest it in the first place. So, I wouldn't recommend putting cards that are under $3 on the platform. But generally, I think overall, this is probably the most universally used strategy for selling cards on COMC. The cards that you just don't want to have to deal with, that you don't want to have to deal with all the labor that comes with eBay and other things, hands off, send it to the platform. They do all the work for you. Eventually it sells. That's the best reason to use COMC, I would say. Strategy 2. Find good deals and flip them directly on the platform. Now, this can be, on the pro side, this can be really fun. Maybe it's in the evening, you're watching a movie, like you don't put your full attention on something like a movie, but you're kind of hanging out doing that. And then you can kind of be like looking through the marketplace, just kind of fun, flipping through, seeing what cards are there. This is fun. Or if it's just a relaxing every once in a while, if I've had a really busy day, my most enjoyable thing to do is just like lay down with my computer and kind of look through the marketplace and just see what cards I can find. It's just fun. There's also, if you look, there's quite a few opportunities on COMC to flip. And part of that is because of the size of the platform. It's a very large platform. When people put cards up there, because there's something like 40 million cards get hidden in there all the time where, people are not finding them. So if you can find them, you can find good flipping opportunities. And when I say flipping opportunities, it could be that you just buy it really low and put it right back up for sale and buy it now for a higher price. I do that sometimes. It could be that you're finding cards that you think would do well in like a live auction type of thing, something that looks really cool and shiny, but that's kind of lower end. So you could buy that, put it up for an auction and live auction and maybe do well. Or for, when they have these, we'll talk later about like the no minimum bid, the no minimum auction fee events. There's times when you can flip cards for that sort of event. So there's opportunities. You just have to kind of become aware of what an opportunity looks like. On the cons, and this kind of speaks to what I was just saying, that it can be hard to find. The place I'll look for flips most often is I'll just get on COMC every once in a while and just click in, recently added cards, like the new arrivals, basically. You just go into whatever sport you want or whatever section you want and then filter it by recently added. And then you can see what cards are just on the platform. Every once in a while, that's the best place to find flipping opportunities, because it's somebody who's just put a card up right there. There hasn't been many eyeballs on it yet. So if you're one of the first eyeballs on it, you might be able to find the opportunities for flipping. And then the nice thing about that is if you do that and then you flip it and say it's still on the list as some of the most recently added, then other people who might be trying to flip might flip your flip. It happens sometimes. If I try to do it that way, usually I have my profit margins just small. Like I'm just seeing if I can flip something really quickly while somebody else, just before somebody else gets a chance to, kind of thing. Another con to this though is there aren't enough search filters on COMC. I wish there was ways to kind of filter out certain cards above or below a certain price range, or if I could filter for cards that are already like uploaded as elite, or if there was various ways I could filter things so I could be finding kind of the hidden gems, it would be helpful. Right now it's a little bit random. I have to just hope I can find them. They don't have many filters in the search. Another one that some people will talk about as a way is flipping ports. But I would highly recommend you be very careful about this. I think some people have been able to flip some ports. A port, by the way, is just somebody could sell their entire platform, like all the cards they're selling, or maybe all the cards they're selling from one sport. But oftentimes those are really scammy in the way that they're organized. Somebody will have like 12 cards that are on the main page that are kind of highlighted that are like, look pretty nice. And then the rest of the cards are like 2-cent cards and 3-cent cards. And you go in and at first you look, because sometimes the 2-cent, 3-cent cards have an SRP, a suggested retail price of like $5, even though it's like a 2-cent card. And so, if you look at what COMC says is the suggested retail price, it could say this really high number. And then you see, let's say it says the SRP of all these cards combined is $1,000, and you see they're selling this port for $200. And then you see the 12 cards on the main page are like kind of, pretty cool cards. And you're like, wow, if there's 1,000 cards like this, good, this is a great deal. But then you go in there and you see those 12 cards, they look cool, but actually maybe they're $1 a piece, really, if you look at who else is selling them. And then maybe the other 800 cards or however many is on the platform are all like 2 or 3 cent cards. So a lot of the ports are kind of like that. It's somebody trying to hide things and kind of manipulate the way that the COMC SRP thing works to make a port seem like it's a really good deal when it's not. So I've talked about this in other videos. I really think COMC needs to do something about the ports, because I feel like it's only almost used by people who are trying to trick others, which is odd, which is not a good model for something that's going to be a positive environment. So I would just generally not worry about doing that one. All right, strategy 3. Strategy 3, buy raw, grade it directly on the platform, which is a new option that COMC has, and then sell it through buy it nows or through, however you want to sell it. There's a pro of this. Some people really get a lot out of the raw to grade game. This is the most labor-free version of the raw to grade game there is. Literally, you press a button to buy a card, you press a button to send it to grading, and then it eventually finishes grading, and then you press a button to sell it. It's no labor whatsoever, which, is nice. On the con, it is really almost impossible to get a sense of what that card might grade. If you have a card in hand and you're looking at it, it's also hard. You can't reliably know that, but you can learn over time. But when you're looking at a scan, and the quality of the scans on COMC generally are not very good. The elite scans are better quality, but you have to pay $2 for those, for just the better scan. And even then, you still can't tell. You can't see the surface from different angles. There could be scratches you can't see from that particular angle. There could be creases that you can't see because, it's a 2D image. You can't have that card in hand. If you had that card in hand, you might be very clearly and very obviously know that that's not a card that you should send to get graded. And they do have a service called the pre-review service. I have this over on the cons though, for a couple of reasons. One is the pre-review service is $5 per card, which is really way too high. I mean, if I'm thinking about sending in a card that's worth multiple hundreds of dollars for grading, maybe if that $5 fee is worth it, but I would personally rather just go through the process of shipping that card back to myself, review it myself, send it off to PSA myself, rather than spend the $5 to have it go through their pre-review service and then not really know what the results of the pre-review service are. I mean, they basically just have two choices. They say if they think it's a good candidate for grading or if they think it's not. They don't give you any other information. And in my experience, it's not been very reliable. I've had cards come back from that basically they say if it comes back approved from that, then they think it's going to get a PSA 9 or a PSA 10. And if it comes back not approved for that, they think it will get lower than a PSA 9. I've had cases where it got approved and it came back PSA 7 or PSA 8. That's happened several times. I've had other times where they said it wasn't, like I shouldn't send it for getting graded, but I decided to do it anyway because I was like, okay, even if this gets a PSA 8, I think it's better to go ahead and send this off than to sell it raw. And I've had a couple times where those came back a PSA 10. Now I know part of this is you can't completely rely on grading itself. It's a subjective thing in a lot of ways. But if I'm paying a $5 pre-review service type of fee, I would expect there to be a little bit more that they're providing. Like, I want to know why it didn't pass that pre-grade review. What was it? I don't have a sense of if the person doing that pre-grade review really cared about my submission. So I don't like using that pre-grade review service. I think the one positive about it is, again, like I was saying, if you're going to send in a card, $1,000 card, at least the pre-review service is going to make sure that there's not any major issues with that card, like big creases and stuff. So you might prevent yourself from getting some of these PSA 5s and PSA 6s, because I have done this raw to grade before. Like, I remember I had it looked nice from a scan. It was a high quality scan of a Kobe Bryant 97, 98 EX card. It's really cool, kind of like sort of acetate type of card. It's a very cool card. It looked great. It was an elite scan. Everything on it looked wonderful. So I was like, I'm just going to send this off. It looks really beautiful. This is a cool looking card. I think this would be nice graded. I think this will do okay. It came back a PSA 5. I didn't send it in to, you can't send in to pre-grade review services for any cards that are in the 1990s. It has to be in the 2000s. So this one was in the 1990s. So even if I had wanted to, I couldn't do the pre-review service. But I decided to try, and it came back a PSA 5. I actually got that one eventually sent back to myself. I now have it in hand. I still don't know why it has a PSA 5. It's so low, and I can't really tell by looking at it what the issue is. It's another thing that's just about grading. Like, if you're going to grade it, I want to know why. I want to know what the issue is. The PSA 5 is so low, and it looks so perfect. So strange. So this is just something to keep in mind. So this is a strategy that it has worked for me a few times. There's a few cards. I think I mentioned in my last video, there was a Kevin Durant Topps Finest rookie that I got for a good price. I sent it off for grading. It got a PSA 10. I was able to sell it for a significant profit. I think I made a total profit doing that whole situation. I bought the card for $35 or something, sent it for grading for $22, came back a PSA 10 and was able to sell it for like $175. So I made a really nice profit on this raw to grade card. So it was the easiest way I could do a raw to grade. So at times it works, but it's really unreliable because you can't see. So I just wouldn't recommend doing this one very often. The times I would probably use the grading on the platform more frequently, and I say this, I sometimes do still try this. Sometimes even things that don't work, I end up trying again just because I use COMC a lot, and I sometimes probably use it too much. I'm like, probably would be better to just let it sit and let it ride. And sometimes I don't have the patience for that. I'm just like trying to figure out ways to just get things moving. So sometimes that's just my bad. But generally, I don't think this is a strategy worth pursuing too regularly, maybe just to experiment with it. Strategy 4. So this one I've talked about in several different videos. I have a series of videos about this, and this is about selling on COMC's eBay live auctions. So this one is, if you're not familiar with what this is, on Fridays at 1 o'clock, they have these submissions open up. You pay currently, it's $1. It's gone down in price recently, where you can put cards up for sale on live auctions that happen Monday through Friday. Usually they'll have once a month, generally like a higher end one where you have to pay like $5 to put a card. It's like their marquee live auctions for cards that are worth at least $50. And then the other times you have to just pay $1, and then they go up to like just a random mixer. And then they have basically from morning until night, Monday through Friday, they are running these live auctions. You don't know when your card's going to go up on there, but it will go up for sale in these live auctions. So there's some pros and cons to this. You can see my list for this one is kind of a bit longer than my pros and cons for the other one. So on the pro side, selling in rapid live auctions can lead to higher sales prices sometimes. And that sometimes is a key point that we'll look at when we look at the cons. Similarly, this sometimes thing, when it does well, sometimes you can get higher profit margins from live auctions than from anything else at times. And the other thing that's a good pro about this is less about selling, but more about buying. There are times where if you are going to these live auctions at less popular times, just 9 a.m. weekday, Monday morning, who's going to a live auction at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning? There's not that many people in there. So it can be a really good buying opportunity. But again, for selling, if it's a good buying opportunity, that means it's not a good selling opportunity. But that's one of the things that's a con about that is Each of these live auctions can be so different. You know, if you get on to if your card happens to fall onto being sold as the very first card on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, you're probably not going to sell well. But if it happens to be that it's like, I don't know, Thursday evening, it's 6 p.m., you know, when it's like 9 p.m. Eastern time, there's quite a few people on there, like your card might pop off and do really well, but you can't rely on that. You don't know when your card's going to be there. And so each of these live auctions are way, way different from each other. So because of that, the second con here is you can't have expectations. You really can't. It's unreliable. There'll be a card that will do extremely well one time, so you might go ahead and try to buy it and put it up for the same kind of auction again, and it will sell for 99 cents the next time. Maybe it went for $25 or $30 one time and 99 cents the next time. You just can't know. So it's hard to plan for something, you know? So if you're trying to make money with selling sports cards, it's hard to rely on something that is so risky, that has no consistency. And that's related to this third one. Because of that inconsistency, really good cards can occasionally fall through the cracks sometimes. So I don't like putting cards up for sale that are actually, you know, worth more than $10 on these live auctions, because I don't want it to fall through the cracks. You know, I found that I could put a Jordan card that's like a genuinely like a $30 Jordan card, and it might sell for $10. And then I'll put like a $1 Jordan card, and it might also sell for $10. So because of that, I don't like to risk cards that are actually quite good unless it's like obviously quite good. Like if there's something about it that makes it stand out and that people who don't know that much about cards would realize it's a good card, maybe you could consider that for the better cards, but it's risky. So I don't like putting up higher end cards on here too often. Every once in a while I will for the marquee events, just because everybody in that event generally knows that the cards are going to be better. So, you know, they don't go too low. Like nothing will sell 99 cents in that one, but it does sometimes sell for $20. You could easily have a $60 card sell for $20 or $30. So you still do have to be careful. So just generally it's unreliable. I've already mentioned this next point about you can't choose when your cards go up for auction. Some time slots are way better than others. The next con here, and this kind of goes through waves. For a period of time, these live auctions were not filling up very quickly at all, and you could just kind of slowly submit whenever throughout the whole week. That was actually quite nice. The only problem at that stage is it was $2 per submission, which I didn't like that because that felt too expensive per submission. But when they lowered it back down to $1 per submission, which I think is a more reasonable price, it meant that more people were putting cards into this, and it means that it fills up. The time slots for the weekly submissions fill up quickly. So like on Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific, they open it up, and by 2 o'clock Pacific, it's full already. So you have to be ready. You have to have your card. You have to know what cards you're going to put up for auction, and you have to just rapidly do it. Currently, that's the case. I keep missing it. I actually have missed it now for the past 3 or 4 weeks because I'm like, look at my clock. I'm doing my work, and I'm like, oh, it's 2 o'clock. Let me go and see. I think I missed it, and then yep, no time left. So that's unfortunate. And then the last con here is they used to have these auctions where you could submit to a basketball auction and a football auction and a baseball auction and a hockey auction and a Marvel auction or non-sport auction or something like that. Now every single auction is a mixer, both as a buyer and as a seller. I don't like this. As a buyer, I don't have the patience. When I go into these auctions, it goes through so many cards in sports that I don't have that much interest in, that I can't stay in the stream for very long before I get bored. And as a seller, you know, my card, I don't know what's going to be the cards surrounding it. If I'm selling basketball cards and it's surrounded by a bunch of football cards, my card is probably going to be less likely to be, you know, it's not the audience that's been focusing on these football cards that's come through a bunch of times, and then suddenly there's a random basketball card. It doesn't do as well. If it's a basketball auction, then the audience in there is there for basketball cards, and then you tend to have more people wanting your card. So I don't understand why they moved away from having different sports and they moved it into just every single auction being a mixer. I think that was a really bad decision, both for me as a buyer and as a seller. I don't know why they went to that. All right, the next one is strategy 5. By the way, how do you like my Prezi presentation? Strategy 5 is kind of talked about this a little bit, but sell on COMC's no minimum fee auction event. So this is not the live auctions. These are the regular 7-day auctions. In most cases, usually you have to pay at least a $3.50 minimum auction fee. So if your card sells for $20, you have to spend $3.50 for a transaction fee, which is a really high percentage. If your card sells for $5, you have to spend a $3.50 minimum auction fee, which means you basically don't make any money on that card. So, but when they have this no minimum fee auction event, you don't have that $3.50 minimum. So if your card sells for $20, you just have to pay like the 5%, I think it is, plus the 99 cents. You do have to pay 99 cents to put your card up up for auction in this way. So, but still, if you say it makes it viable to sell a card for, I don't know, maybe even like $10. If it's a $10 card, it's viable to put it up for auction. It's probably still better to do it with a card that's worth at least maybe like $15 or something like that, but it's viable to do it for the lower end cards. I mean, you could even potentially make a couple bucks here and there on cards that are selling for $5. I think COMC is hoping people will send cards in that are going to sell for at least $10, and if they do, I think they're more likely to keep up this event as a more often, more regular thing. But yeah, so it's a way for you to offload some of your stale inventory that's kind of, lower to mid-end range kind of stuff. I wouldn't put anything super valuable in this, but it is a good way to get rid of some of your cards. I would suggest doing this more often with cards that are less likely to fall through the cracks. There's a lot of cards that, because COMC is such a large consignor, when they're putting their cards up for auction on eBay, your card is one of many hundreds from just the COMC store. And I don't know if you've noticed from a lot of these other consigners also who sell multiple thousands per day, there's a lot of those cards that end up selling for some of the lowest on the platform just because of how much there is. It's hard for somebody to swim through an ocean of thousands of cards for auction up from one single account. So it's not necessarily the best place to sell cards that might fall through the cracks. You could end up selling cards for $1 or $2 that really should be selling for $10. And for the same reason, because of that, there's some good buying opportunities. So this is another thing to do, either for flipping directly on the platform or for just selling in other places. It is good to look at cards that are, you can do this either on the eBay site or you can do it through COMC's site itself and look for cards that have their auction ending that day. I like to go through and put bids on, if I have some time, to put some pretty low-ish bids on cards that are ending that day. And sometimes I'll pick up a card for extremely low. On the con side, and I've made videos about this first one, COMC's eBay auctions tend to go for less than any other eBay auctions, even other eBay auctions that are big consigners. I've done some like data diving, kind of like looking at a bunch of examples. I've made some videos about it in the past, and it's a very, very high percentage of cards that sell from COMC onto eBay's auctions that go for, like, they are the lowest on the comp spectrum. They're still close to comps generally, but they're the lowest of the different options. So if you have 10 different sales of this card on, some of them are buy it now, some of them are auction. Very, very good chance if COMC was one of those sales, if a COMC auction was one of those sales, most likely it's the 10th of 10, maybe the 9th cheapest, or the 9th of 10, and it's never going to be the highest selling one. I don't fully know why that is. I don't know if there's something that eBay deprioritizes auctions from COMC, or I really don't know what it is, but I've definitely noticed it again and again, and I've made videos kind of tracking that at times too. So that's one thing that keeps me from doing this more than I would otherwise. Otherwise, I probably would do this a little bit more because I do have ways to get some cards for a pretty decent price. So even if some of my cards do sell for a little bit under comp, I can usually still be making a profit on it. But so I still do use it sometimes. But I don't know. It's something I wish COMC could look into and figure out why their auctions tend to go for lower than anyone else on eBay. Another con of this is you can't time the market at all, since it takes an unknown time before your card gets on eBay. So you might be like, okay, it's getting close to the playoffs. Now's a good time to try to put my cards up on auction. You put it up. You don't know how long it's going to take them to get your card up. It could be past the time that you wanted it to be. Your hype time, the time you were aiming for, has passed by. Your card now sells for a lot less. You can't time the market. So that's one of the things that's an overall kind of negative about COMC, is it's really hard to time things. Like, it takes 4 months to get a card ingested into the system. If you want to put anything up into auctions, it takes weeks before it processes to go into that next phase. So everything moves slower. Selling is slower. Everything is kind of slower on there. So you have to keep that in mind about the types of cards that you're sending into COMC. You have to expect that slowness. And then the other con here is more of a general con when it comes to auctions in general, live auctions, 7-day auctions, any auctions. Auctions just are riskier. You don't know what is going to happen. All right, let's look at strategy 6. Strategy 6 is buy lower end cards to sell on something like Whatnot. This is an interesting one. I don't have experience with this yet, although I'm preparing myself to have some experience with this. On the pro side, this is, I say, maybe fun. So it depends on you. Some people might really enjoy the process of being on a live auction and kind of engaging with an audience and talking through this and doing, some people might find that a lot of fun, and some people might find that like the opposite of fun, the worst kind of thing that you could do. So that's one thing. The pro about doing this with COMC is you can build up quite a good inventory, I think. If you're looking to do this on Whatnot regularly, if you're trying to build up a Whatnot audience, then you could probably get quite a few lower end cards, like cool looking cards. You have to be careful about the kind of card you're getting. You get something that really like is shiny and cool, or like is like vintage of a really great player, but that is really low. And you can find those on COMC sometimes better than anywhere else. You could find like a parallel of Patrick Mahomes for $1 that you could put up for sale starting as with an auction at $2 on Whatnot, and it might end up selling for $8. But if you were to try to sell it on COMC, it would have only been able to sell for that $1 or whatever. Like, there are a lot of cards that are kind of like that, and part of the reason for that is some of the lower end cards on COMC become cheaper than any other place. You can't find it that cheap anywhere else, and it's because of what I'll call the penny battle that I was referring to before. Because all of the cards of that particular card are all on one page. On eBay, if you're looking for a card, you put it in the search engine, and it's kind of like you have to pop around. It's like, oh, there's one of it, and then maybe you scroll down and you find another one of it or something like that. On COMC, every single card that's uploaded to their system that's been sent to them of that card is all on one page. So you very clearly can see, okay, there's 30 cards up for sale, and this is the cheapest one. So of course you're going to look right at the cheapest ones and make offers on the cheapest couple, which means that, there's an advantage to people going in there and repricing themselves to be the lowest price on the platform. And if people get into a battle about doing that, the cards, these lower end cards, can sometimes go for really, really cheap. And sometimes people will also, because you don't have to pay any storage fee once you've put a card up for 75 cents. So it's really common. If somebody puts a card up for $3, it hasn't sold for a while, they're paying a penny per month on that card. And if they've had it in there for a long time for a $3 card, they're like, I just don't want to deal with this card anymore. They'll put it up for 75 cents, which means that they don't have to pay that 1 cent fee anymore. And then you go in and buy it for 75 cents. And then you pay your 25-cent shipping on top of that. You get it for $1. You put it on Whatnot, you start it at a $2 fee, at a $2 auction, and it sells for, even if it sells for $2, you've made a profit on it. So, so this sort of thing, I think it can work. And that's related to this last pro here I have, is cool looking lower end cards really go higher in live auctions on Whatnot than anywhere else. It seems to me. I don't have evidence to support that directly, just qualitatively it seems that way. On the con side for this strategy is lower end cards generally mean smaller profit margins. So you're going to have to do a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of labor. You'll probably make profit on it, but like if you're calculating it in based on the amount of like hours that you're spending on it, like this is probably one of the lower hourly rates you can give to yourself, though it's probably one of the more guaranteed ways that you are actually making some profit. The second con here is an interesting one, and it's kind of true to any live auction site. Really the reason why this strategy works is because you're banking on people not having card knowledge and not having time to go do their research about a card. So it can kind of feel a little bit icky, actually, because you're kind of relying on people's lack of knowledge. So that's weird when you think about it that way. You know that this card is $1. This person could go to eBay and probably find this card for $2. They could go to COMC and find this card for $1. They could go to buysportscard.com and find this card for $1.50. You know that. But they only have 10 seconds, where they have to make a bid. They don't have time to gain that information. So they're just making a quick bid based on an impression of something. And so these cards that sell generally widely for $1 or $2 will sell for $8 just because people, you're relying on people's lack of knowledge, which is a weird way to go about trying to make money in the sports card world. The next one here is you have to have a good way of organizing larger quantities of cards. If you're going in and on COMC and whenever you find these lower end cards, you're building up a big batch of inventory and then sending it to yourself. Once you get it, you have to have a very clear way of keeping your cards organized. And if you're trying to do this with lower end cards, it's much more about quantity. You're going to have a lot. So you want to keep these things well organized, especially if you want to sell them well on Whatnot. I mean, if you could have a Whatnot stream that's just GOATs, you just have your time where this stream is going to be all Jordan and LeBron and Kobe and and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes or something like this, so you can advertise for that. You have to be able to organize all your cards so you have all those easily accessible. And then you also have to be able to organize them well when you're selling them, so that, you if you're selling on Whatnot in this way, you're probably going to be selling 100 cards, 200 cards in one stream. So you have to have a really clear way of keeping your cards organized for shipping and everything as well. And that kind of speaks to this next point here about what selling on Whatnot is a lot of work. Not only do you have to be there live, full of energy, giving your all into that stream, but there's a lot of work if you're trying to sell lower end cards. You have to spend a lot more time preparing for the shipping and all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of work, and selling on Whatnot is not for everyone. For some people, like I was saying before, this could be a lot of fun. And for some people, this could be the absolute opposite of fun. That one kind of really depends on your personality. All right, for strategy 7, buy lower end cards to fill up budget boxes for card shows. So I have talked about this one before. One of the pros of this is budget boxes are popular at card shows. It can bring a lot of people to your table. So maybe you have a display where you have some of your better cards, and you might get some people kind of going by, taking a look at it. But the people who are coming over and they see the budget boxes and they just spend bunches of time looking through your budget boxes, they're also more likely to try to build up a larger group, a larger batch of cards so they can get a discount. So they're probably going to be the ones who are also looking at your higher end cards a little bit closer as well, because they're trying to bundle up and get a whole bunch of cards at once. So if you're trying to get people to your table, this is a good way. Budget boxes just seem like a good way for that in general. And like I was saying in the last one, lower end cards can sometimes be better priced on COMC than anywhere else because of that penny battle. So you can frequently find cards for less than $1 that you could easily put into a budget box, and maybe a $3 box or something like that, and probably easily sell it. On the Pro too, if you like card shows and you want to set up at card shows, this is just another thing to increase your inventory, because you want to do card shows. So if that's you, then this is a good option. On the con, this is another one of these that takes a lot of time, a lot of labor, and the profit margins per card are very small. So again, it's all about quantity. The amount of time, the amount of money you're making per hour of work is probably not very good for this one. And just like the last one, you also have to be able to store and organize your cards really well. And then I have the next one in the pros. I have you get to set up at card shows, and in the cons, I have you have to set up at card shows. So this one, card shows, is really going to be the way that you make profit on this. There's not really another way to do it to make profit. I mean, and maybe you could bunch together cards into a lot of just parallels of Patrick Mahomes and sell it on eBay as a lot, and that you spent $1 on each of these 10 cards, but you think you could probably get $30 if you send 10 parallel cards of Patrick Mahomes, auction starting at $10, and then see where it builds up to. Maybe you could make a profit on that. I don't know. I didn't put that as one of my strategies, but I think generally this is an approach that you probably want to do if you were planning on setting up at card shows anyway, and you wanted to do that in a frequent way. This would just be one thing to add to your table kind of thing. All right, and then the very last, strategy 8, is related to sending in cards that don't match the kind of brand you have for your eBay or Whatnot store. So in the pros, I kind of explain what this one is. Sometimes you're trying to cultivate a particular audience in your eBay or your Whatnot store. So, followers on your eBay store might be following because they know that your site is the place to come to if they're looking for Hall of Fame autograph cards, or they're looking for, higher end baseball, or whatever it is that's kind of like the main thing you're selling. They're not coming there just looking for absolutely anything and everything. You're kind of cultivating, if you are doing it this way, you might be cultivating a particular audience with the type of cards that you sell. And there's some cards that won't really fit that don't really meet the needs of your particular audience. I could think there's probably a lot of examples of this of people who are selling vintage cards on eBay or on Whatnot. Like if you're selling vintage cards, you're cultivating a vintage card audience. You want people to find your site who are into vintage cards so that they keep coming back and they become a regular audience. If your vintage card website starts selling, 75% of the cards are like this modern shiny things that vintage card people don't like, then eventually the vintage card audience that you've been cultivating starts to drift away and look elsewhere because your site has become crowded with all this other stuff that they're not interested in. So there are occasions when you are wanting to sell in just that particular way. So COMC can be a good place to sell your other stuff, everything else that doesn't kind of fit the vibe that you're trying to cultivate in your particular store, you can sell on COMC. The con with this, and these are more general cons than just for this one, but a lot of times if you're doing it that way, you might have cards of all sorts of price ranges, and you're not going to want to send in cards that are less than $3. You have to really find a different strategy than COMC for your cards that are less than $3. Maybe Whatnot, maybe Lots, maybe garbage, whatever it might be. But it's not a good place for selling cards under $3. And it's also not a good place to send in cards that are overpopulated on the platform and that might have continuing population growth on the platform as well. If you have a card that's from the Junk Wax era, or you have a card that's from the last couple of years of Prism basketball or football, there's still a chance that there's going to be a lot more of those cards coming up on the platform. So there's going to be people underpricing you as more and more cards come on there. So then you're going to have to spend the time repricing and having that penny battle and lowering your price. And eventually you're either going to have to lower your price lower than what you wanted it to, or your card's just going to sit there for a really long time. So you don't really want to send in cards that are too overpopulated on the platform. So that would be a general negative for not just this strategy, but in general. So anyway, that was I've talked about making this video before. Those were 8 strategies that I think are worth thinking about when trying to make money on COMC. Like I was saying, I think the one strategy that is the most universally applied is just if you're trying to slowly sell off your cards that are worth like $3 to $25 and you don't want to put any labor into it, this is the main reason I would suggest using COMC. But anyway, I hope this video was useful for you. I will see you in the next one. Peace.